So, recording in progress. Please authorize recording. Okay, so let's start. We're going to talk about the wildlife management today and on Wednesday. And then next week, Monday, we'll talk about enclosures. And then we'll talk, on Wednesday, we'll talk about enrichment. Trying mag-move. It's so slow. Wait. Okay. Wait lang Nagka-loko-loko. Bakit nandun na siya agad-agad? Ito muna ako. Ay. Napunta pala ako sa link. Okay, so to be a good manager, you have several traits that you need to acquire to manage wildlife. No? And these traits are actually graded. No? When I did my diploma in endangered species management, they grade all of these traits in the students. No? So these are observation skills. Obviously, you need to have good observation skills because your patients don't speak. And more so in wildlife because they don't typically show what domestic animals show when there's pain or there is sickness. No? So it's really important to hone our observation skills. Next is animal sense. What does this mean? It means that you can put yourself in their shoes. You could understand how it would feel to be a monkey, for instance, in a small cage. So, and then apply this to your management. It means also that you need to be able to not just instinctively, no, but to also learn more about animal behavior and apply this to your management. Next trait to acquire is creativity, especially in the context of a third world nation, developing country. There are things that are not readily available to us, and we always need to be creative. And this is true not just for the Philippines, but all over the world. Animal managers should be creative in responding to challenges in the job. No? There will be times when you need to act right away, but there are no available resources, so you need to be creative right away as well. So let's get on to the heart of the matter. There are several things that are involved in management, and the first thing is identification. I always say that identification is key. No? It's the key to managing your animals. It's the key to diets, the key to behavior, the key to restraint, to everything. So without identifying the animal, we will not be able to tell, or we will not be able to perform the rest of the management methods. So first and foremost, we need to identify the animal. So for instance, in amphibians, it's really important to know the parts first of the animal, because there are animals that will show, for instance, so that you can tell what kind of animal it is. So features such as tubercles on the base of each toe, for instance. So in this picture, that is a foot of a frog, because their hands, which are the forelimbs, have 4 fingers. They have 5 toes. So it's really important to be versed in things like this. This picture below is a picture of a Philippine toad, which has the supraorbital and parietal crests. It doesn't occur, it only occurs in Palawan, this Philippine toad. As for birds, their bills kind of tell you what they eat, more or less. So the bills are, of course, designed to acquire food. So we can tell what a bird eats by its bill, and we can tell where it lives by looking at its feet. So for instance, this yakana lives in marshes. It has long toes so that it can distribute its weight and use the what do you call it, the surface pressure of water to kind of walk on water. Obviously, the feet of the mallard and the coot are adapted to swimming or paddling in the water, while the feet of the ostrich is adapted to running. So if you don't know the animal, you look at the body parts, and the body of the animal will give you clues on its lifestyle. So for identification, so one is to identify the species or what animal it is. And another is to identify the individual animal. So identifying the individual animal is really important for management, especially if you're looking into disease prevention, breeding, as well as medication. So you don't want to treat the animal you already treated before, no? So that there won't be double dosing, ganyan. So it's really important to identify the animal. And there are ways to do that. There's a passive identification. This means that you identify using the features of the animals. In hornbills, we use the bill's stripes. In spotted deer, apparently the spots are unique to each deer, etc. It's true for whale sharks at least. The spots near the gills are unique to each individual whale shark. As for active identification, these are identification methods that you need to put on the animal, such as tattoos, notching, microchip implantation. So here are the examples of these active identification methods. We have the ear tag from this deer, and there are bird rings on this flamingo, and wing tags. Essentially just, we call this wing bands, no? But it's essentially wire, what's this? Tie wire lang yan eh. Tie wires connect, then attached to another bigger band for the wing. So these are used to identify individual animals in facilities. The next in line for management methods is housing. Siyempre, you've identified the animal. If you know what the animal is, then you have an idea on where it lives. And housing is really important because it's most often the root of all problems in captive wild animals. So as much as we can, we need to simulate the animal's natural environment. Because, again, problems such as these are management related, and a lot of this have to do with improper housing. So these two photos, one on top of the other, is that's a case of bumblefoot. As well as, this one big photo here is also a case of bumblefoot, but in a crocodile. So that was the first time I saw bumblefoot in a crocodile. And it was because of poor housing. I'm totally against having metal perches in enclosures because of the quality of the material, and metal does not occur in the wild until you dig them up. So there are no metal perches in the wild, only natural tree perches. So it's really important, if you want to bring the natural environment in captivity in the enclosure, then you don't use metal perching, because this can result to metal perching. A case in point, this is a sailfin lizard. It used to live when there was my first case, si Ama. This is Ama. My first case, right after I took oath as a veterinarian, my first job was in a conservation center on Negros. And my first case was a case of rostral trauma in 3 sailfin lizards. No? And one of them is this specimen. This is the male, Ama, and the others, syempre yung kasama niya si Ina. Tapos yung kasama nila, si Kabit, hindi joke. Anyway, so there were 3 sailfin lizards in one small enclosure, and the enclosure was so bare, they end up scaring themselves. No? And when they get scared, they tend to try to escape and bang their faces on the enclosure wall. So this is a typical sailfin enclosure in local rescue centers in the Philippines. In fact, this is in the National Rescue Center of the Philippines, and these are sailfin lizard enclosures. So by nature, if we identify the animal, no, by nature, sailfin lizards, if you saw them, oh wait, they're green, right? And they like to hide in bushes or in trees. They kind of freeze when you enter, or when they feel like there's an intruder, they will freeze and rely on their camouflage abilities, because they really blend in well with the environment. But in an enclosure like this, there will be nothing to blend in. Nothing, because there are no vegetation and there's not a single drop of water there. No. So one other thing they do is they go into the water because they live near rivers and streams, and they stay there until the danger has passed. But if they live in such an enclosure, then they won't have a chance. So they end up banging their heads against the enclosures, and they end up with these lesions. No? And if you notice, some of the nasal turbinates are already exposed in this photo. So Ama, eventually, because we were having those problems, we looked for funding to build a huge enclosure for the 3 of them. And this is the enclosure that we came up with. After we gave this enclosure to those 3 sailfin lizards, we never had the problem of rostral trauma ever. And they end up breeding. No? So we were able to release some of these, their babies back into the wild. So it's really important to get to know your animals. No? Again, we started from identification. And then now, in order to find out the problems. May chat po ako. Did you ever struggle to educate people who handle wild animals? Yeah, sometimes. So there's a question here. Hello, Doc. Did you ever struggle to educate people who handle wild animals on how their enclosure should be built? Struggle, not so much, because I just tell them, maybe you should do it this way. It's up to them to do the right thing, but most of the time they don't. That's okay. There are a couple of facilities that are compliant, no? But I won't rely on the BMB to do that. I think they're trying to do better now. Hopefully they can do better, because we've been working with them for a while already. Tapos yun, hindi masyadong masaya yung results. But for instance, facilities like Katala Foundation, yan, they actually try to do better. And also Philippine Eagle Foundation. So there are very few facilities in the Philippines that actually try to look after the welfare. Like earnestly, no, look after animal welfare, unfortunately, in terms of enclosure. No? So for instance, this enclosure, the sailfin enclosure, we didn't have a lot of budget. So that little mound, like hill behind you, like at the back of the enclosure, was actually discarded. You know, when they started to build, for those who live in Bacolod, no, So when they started to build the first overpass in Bacolod, which is in front of Robinson's place in Bacolod, they had to destroy a part of the road, and some of that concrete hill at the back of the enclosure are actually like remnants of that. Like they were blocks of concrete from the road that we inverted so that the gravel ended up on top, and then we put some soil on it so that it can be planted. And then there's a fountain incorporated here, so the enclosure has a little waterfall inside, not just for the animals, for ambience as well for the visitors, because they can hear active water movement inside. But this enclosure, even if the people or the visitors come near, it's so the animals feel really secure because they have a hiding place and they have a pond which they can jump into whenever they feel uncomfortable. So it's really important first to know your animal and then decide, or design the enclosure that is well suited, for the animals in terms of their behavior and their traits, their actual habitat. Next is the same is true for birds. For instance, this is a photo I took in one of our enclosures there in Negros Forest Park. This is inside the enclosure. So we're not really used to having planted enclosures in the Philippines, but I think we should have done that yesterday because it's so easy to maintain plants in our country anyway. So yeah, but for parrots, it's really important that the plants are already very well established in the enclosure before we put in the birds, because they're totally destructive animals. So, but if you cannot put in the habitat, the natural habitat inside, you can make do with an artificial habitat, for instance. So this is in Pingtung Rescue Center in Taiwan, where they built an artificial forest for pig-tailed macaques. This is huge. There are about 20 macaques inside, if you see the small monkeys in there. And there's another monkey on top of that pole. So they built it in a way that it has several layers and several heights. Also because these animals are a group species, so they will tend to have hierarchy, in in their dynamics, population dynamics. So it's really important also to consider that, That's why this enclosure also has hiding places and places to run away from aggressors, etc., so that they can maintain the dynamics of the troop, but also keep animals safe, from attacks from conspecifics. So we'll end there for now, and we'll continue on Wednesday, so that you have time to do the activity for this for today. I'll stop sharing. So far, are there any questions apart from that other question, parang chat-in question? May questions so far? Anyone?
None, Doc.
Okay. Sige. So as for your activity, it's again a group discussion. It's 10 points and you have to discuss within the group. Okay? The question is, how can ecology relate to management? You have until 5 p.m. today to finish your discussion. I'll see if it's available now.
Dok,
Yes, it's available now.
Hindi pa po siya available kasi yung requisite po para
Yeah.
makapag-reply dun, may grade po dapat dun sa previous po, Dok.
From last time, no? From last week.
Yes, Doc.
Yeah. So, kailangan nyo yung wait, let's see. Yeah. You have, wait lang. Hindi, tanggalin natin yun. Hindi ko pala na-gradean. Sorry. Asa na yun? Ito yun. Yung on the EID trail ba yun?
Yes po, Doc.
Okay, so tanggalin natin yun. Ang dami kasing ganap this week. Okay, go. Sige. Okay, I think it's available now. Sige, thank you for reminding me. And then, question again. Ha? 9 p.m.? Paano 9 p.m.?
Doc, hindi pa rin po available.
What?
Same po, Doc. Same.
Weird. Available from... Lagay natin. Paki-check.
Hindi pa rin po, Doc.
That's so strange. It should be. Bakit ganon siya? Okay, tapos 2022 naman. Then, wait, tapusin pala na i-stop recording ko muna pala kasi